Not to sound dated, but there was a time long ago when fighting games were the premier gaming experience. A time of arcades, alongside a solid bullet hell, DDR pad, racing, and air hockey table. An arcade was incomplete without at least one long line of fighting games. Be it Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, Dead or Alive, Samurai Showdown, or any number of other legendary titles of the era, well, that era is long gone now. Although the reason why the genre declined over the years is worthy of its own video, in today's video, we want to explore what is ahead. Why does it seem from the inside that we are on the cusp of another golden age of fighting games? A generation of talented developers that are crafting the experience we all crave, and yet, for the wider gaming industry, it seems we are still just the sideshow. Put in another way, how come fighting games are having one of the best years they've ever had, but don't seem to have any influence on the wider industry? Before we jump into it, however, we do want to ask you to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our content this 2024. Tekken 8 is just around the corner, and you will not want to miss any of it with us or on our website at DashFight.com. Perhaps one of the biggest factors contributing to fighting games' slow shift into the background for the industry has been gaming's massive growth over the past 20 years. The industry is now worth billions of dollars every year. People are spending more money on video games than on movies, music, and almost every other type of media entertainment. Fighting games have benefited from this growth too, but not as much as other genres in the space. From massive RPGs, first-person shooters, strategy games, MOBAs, and more, the FGC is now just another fish in the vast ocean of gaming experiences. That is to say nothing of mobile gaming, which in many areas of the world is as ubiquitous as arcades once were. Unfortunately, AAA games like Street Fighter 6, Mortal Kombat 1, and Tekken 8 are not available on those popular platforms. There are a number of fighting games on mobile, though they often land into one of two categories. Either they are true ports of their console or PC versions, as this is the case with Skullgirls, which makes acceptable compromises to keep the game enjoyable. The other category is weird tie-in games that rarely have anything to do with the original genre. Unfortunately, we have to point out Mortal Kombat Onslaught, a well-reviewed game on its own, but very clearly not a fighting game. A factor that has stifled the approachability of the scene to a wider audience is that of expected proficiency in fighting games. Although this affects a number of games on the market, from first-person shooters to MOBAs and everything in between. In fighting games, it feels almost impossible to shed the image that players always have to improve, always play their best, and always be competing. It didn't used to be this way. Fighting games had a number of years, especially during the arcade and early home console eras, where the only people you could realistically play with were friends or family. A time when mashing buttons was sufficient to have a good time and laugh at the absurdity of missing every single hit until someone magically inputted a Hadouken and then spent the next hour trying to figure out how that happened. Obviously, there was still competition, but for the general audience, that was either a thing in places like Japan, which had a much stronger arcade culture, or a nerd that found a magazine with all the moves for Street Fighter 2 and memorized them. This next generation of major fighting games, Street Fighter 6, Mortal Kombat 1, and Tekken 8, are trying to bring back some of those social elements. Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 in particular have worked hard on creating lobbies where players can interact with others and play randoms, far away from the pressure of winning ranked matches. But decades of competition heritage are hard to balance. For the time being, the mainstream public's perception of fighting games being exclusively for try-hard players will likely continue. One of the metrics we have to gauge how much of an impact fighting games seem to have on the rest of the industry is the award season. From the Game Awards to the esports awards to BAFTA and DICE, there are a number of organizations that release their short list of titles that they believe have merit being called the best among the rest. Yet, even on the basis of offering recognition for what a year it has been for fighting games, there were no speeches for best fighting games at this year's Game Awards. Though that might be more of a general issue with the show than just fighting games, it is very telling that it was presented on the secondary stage like racing and strategy games. And I mean no disrespect to those genres, by the way, especially to strategy. They are still lumped in with simulation games. Can you believe that? Anyway, before we go even more off track, we have to mention the robbery that was EVO 2023 not receiving the best esport event of the year. It was the largest EVO in the past 2 decades, with nearly 10,000 players. And that's not spectators, that's players in brackets competing. If that is not a clear sign of an award-worthy esports event, then we are really struggling with what the awards are supposed to represent. Even as the people in the FGC forge incredible careers, there seems to be a blind spot among the wider industry about the greatness of today's best competitors here. That is not to downplay other scenes' very real achievements, but at some point it becomes harder and harder to rationalize why FGC competitors, commentators, organizers, and even developers receive very little recognition for their accomplishments. Another element that might give us some insight as to why fighting game titles have become so obscure in the public consciousness might be the game developers themselves. No, we are not suggesting they are making bad games, but it's difficult to shake off the uneasy feeling of, are we just recycling the same ideas? Especially considering how long the careers of many of these developers are. We admit this is cherry picking, but the platform fighter's godfather, Masahiro Sakurai, has worked on the Smash franchise for 2 decades. Fighting for that record is Katsuhiro Harada, Tekken's producer, who has been in the post since before the year 2000. Of course, Japanese developers are not the only ones on this. Ed Boon, too, has been leading the Mortal Kombat franchise longer than a substantial number of our viewers have been alive for. Of course, they are all fantastic directors and producers whose teams have certainly kept up with the times and brought new blood into the fold, but it might be time to give the young folks a chance. And thankfully, we have seen a number of attempts. The Rivals of Aether development team, which is made up of many fans of platform fighters, recently managed to secure over $1 million for the sequel, Rivals 2. On the same platform, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, for all its flaws, has been able to secure a sequel. Finally, Multiverses and the team at Player First Games are still hard at work on a possible release for a WB-backed platform fighter. Outside of platform fighters, the biggest potential challenger to the old guard is Riot's Project L. The Tencent-owned developer has long set its sights on the wide range of competitive scenes that make up esports. They demonstrated their ability to break into a market with Valorant, and it follows that in time, Project L, their 2v2 fighter, could do the same. Interestingly, it was Riot's World Championship Finals for League of Legends, its legendary star Faker, and Valorant's undisputable coach brilliance Potter that swept the awards for esports. Maybe once the company finally enters the FGC, the relevance of the genre will be undeniable to any remaining holdouts, though it does feel somewhat deflating to think it would take a major company like Riot for the rest of gaming to look back in the FGC's general direction again. In many ways, mainstream gaming ignores a lot of the work grassroots and independent organizations do to host major tournaments for the FGC, particularly in-person events, the biggest of which ended up being a part of the games' official circuits. A possible explanation is that when compared with other major competitive titles like Valorant, League of Legends, or Dota's International, these FGC events are not produced wholly by their developers or publishers. For one reason or another, the gaming industry has a blind spot for the FGC's independent organizers that make events like EVO, CEO, Combo Breaker, and more happen. Speaking of which, we love to cover these majors as we did EVO 2023 live from the ground. If you want to help us, you can join our Patreon, and with support, we can amplify the voices of the FGC. Become one of our patrons today, like all these lovely people on the screen. Publishers like Capcom, NetherRealm Studios, and Bandai Namco are also not as invested in these competitions. They have their circuits and produce their finals, but it is far from their priorities. That is to say nothing of Nintendo, who in recent years have been truly hostile towards its competitive communities in Smash, only recently testing out a new community tournament organizing agreement, which still limits many TOs' options. As an example, Pro Competition's paltry prize pool budget of a little over $200,000 seems low, considering it is, or what it's supposed to be, is a circuit with multiple online and offline stops. Street Fighter VI's $2 million is clearly better, but it also pales in comparison to the budgets other Capcom titles receive for their marketing, like Resident Evil, Monster Hunter, or yes, even Exoprimal. There is no one single reason why fighting games are not a part of the broader gaming discourse. Whether that is for the best or the worst is up for debate, which we hope you chip in for in the comments. But things are trending up for the scene. Whether by the strength of the community or a major publisher entering the space, it is a tide that rises all boats. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We really appreciate it. If you liked what you saw, give the video a like, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments why. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.